My name is Sejal Bascom and I'm a visual artist from Trinidad and Tobago. This research paper is an exploration into some of the underlying reasons behind the artistic choices made by some male Trinidadian visual artists. These could be both intentional or subconscious reasons, and the artists in particular that the study focuses on are Bosco Holder, Peter Doig, Jackie Hinkson, Christopher Cozier, and Jay Lovelace. The hope is that by examining the artistic choices of these artists, the study will be able to allow us to have a greater understanding of the relationship between visual artistic expression and lived experiences. Now, when it comes to the context of this research, for me it was really important to conduct this study because I feel as though we tend to focus a lot more on the finished product of an artwork and not so much on the why behind the artwork, and not just behind the finished artwork piece, but behind all the choices, down to the choice of an artist choosing to use this kind of brush instead of that one, or choosing to paint with colors that are desaturated compared to dull colors, and also why the artist chooses to depict things in the way that he does. Why is his style this way instead of that, right? And I just thought that it would be really interesting to dig deep into the mundane and the technical choices, because that would allow us to kind of create a framework where we'll be able to understand how, like, what are the reasons behind that, so we'll be able to understand how our lived experiences are reflected back to us in our art or through our art, and on what level. For instance, if we look at an artist like Jackie Hinkson, right, he tends to really, all his watercolor paintings all seem to have this kind of light to them, like a 5 o'clock kind of shadow. And how we understand a 5 o'clock shadow in Trinidad is different to the 5 o'clock shadow that may be cast in Texas, right? But it has, Jackie's watercolors really have this distinct kind of 5 o'clock light. And how I'm able to understand that is because I have experience with 5 o'clock light. So why does he choose this time of day to depict? Does he even know that he's doing that? Is it like a, because this is just me looking in and I'm seeing that this really looks like 5 o'clock in Trinidad, you know what I mean? So what is the reasoning behind that? And then even depending on that, why the watercolors to depict scenes like this? But then he uses a lot of charcoal and drawing and thing to depict steel pan scenes, and he does a lot of like scratchy drawings and things like that to compose the image of the figure. Why the scratchy drawings instead of like clean line drawings? You know what I mean? Why the scratch? And it's almost like if the artwork itself kind of like emerges out of the scratches. You kind of like the form is like a line creates like all of these multiple forms just based off of how he plays with light and dark through a simple scratch. Why the scratch? Why the kind of chaotic movement like this to create a image that is somehow very still, very calm? So that's what I'm really interested in, kind of figuring out with all the other artists as well, and kind of being able to have a comparison and contrast between all the artists to get an overall feel of how Trinidad and the lived experience of being a Trinidadian shows up in the work of male Trinidadian artists. My research problem, put simply, is this: in what ways do the social environments and personal lived experiences of 5 male Trinidadian artists shape their artistic choices in terms of the choice of subject matter, the choice of style, the choice of technique, tools, materials, colors used to create said artworks? My research problem is this: visual art in general, but more specifically Trinidadian visual art, is often analyzed on the premise of like technique, concept, composition, right? A lot of the formal elements of art: line, shape, form, pattern, balance, right? And even some conceptual thought as well, right? That's normally what the artist kind of like analyzed on or critiqued on. However, the underlying motivations behind the artistic choices aren't touched on as much, right? It remains underexplored. Oftentimes, the works are critiqued based off of their aesthetic components, but there seems to be very little inquiry into what the artist is actually thinking in terms of like the why behind a lot of the choices that they make and a lot of the things that they do and a lot of the things that they choose to produce. By not just focusing on the what, but also shedding light on the why, this research aims to take a deeper look into how social environments and personal experiences shape visual artistic expression, right? The problem statement is this, right? We tend as a society to look too much at the outer, or how I should say, we don't take a deep dive into the physical elements, into the the thought behind the artwork. I think that this research is very necessary because it allows us to not just look at the artwork from a critical point of view in terms of like I'm looking at this on the outside and I'm critiquing it and coming up with an analysis myself, but from the point of view of the artist himself. And this allows us to see the artwork through the artist's eyes, because a lot of the times we see artwork through the eyes of the onlooker or the viewer, but now we're able to fully interpret a work based off of the person who created the work. So for my lecture review, I focus a lot on the work of Joshua Strotty, John Dewey, and Sean O'Hagan. Now, Joshua Strotty, he wrote a paper, an article, on the life and work of Bosco Holder and Geoffrey Holder, but I was particularly interested in Bosco Holder. And in his analysis of Bosco's work, he really looked into how Bosco was able to redefine representations of blackness in Trinidad during the mid-20th century, right? Through his biographical study that really was done based off of like interviews with his families and close friends and people who were around him at the time, right? He was able to decipher that Holder's paintings, right, especially his nudes of black men and women, really challenged the colonial norms of that time, when black people were not really shown in this sort of way, right? It really merged utopian ideals with underlying cynicism, and it was shaped by Bosco's experience as a black man in a British colony, right? So his artistic practice was one that was really centered around painting from live observation through the use of ordinary people as models, right? And a lot of the time, the same model will be used repeatedly. So for instance, a question that I would want to know is, why the use of the repeated model? Why was he so focused on repeating this person over and over and over? It kind of begs the question, or it kind of sheds light on the fact that it was not that he was simply into portraits. There was something about this person or these people that really captivated him, and something that he really decided to like hone in on, you know what I mean? And it also shows that well, his research also showed that Bosco wasn't totally concerned with captivating like 100% photo reality, because a lot of the time he would have models pose for him, and then the model would be shocked when at the end of the painting they're completely nude in the painting when they were not nude when he was painting them, right? So it kind of makes me wonder as well, okay Bosco, why that choice? Why that choice to paint them in the nude? And also, why was it that he chose to use portraiture as a method to show what he was trying to show, you know? This analysis, we really see that post-colonial thought was a theory that was really emphasized a lot in Bosco's work. He was able to create paintings where blackness was celebrated, blackness was seen as something that is beautiful, right? And even how he used light, he uses very blue tone to create light in his paintings. Why? What was he seeing? What was his fascination? Why did he even feel the need to paint black people? And then it also makes you back the question of like, if Bosco was not living in Trinidad during that time, would his paintings have been different? Would he still be so concerned with painting black people in a very regal way? Schultes also mentioned that even though Bosco and his brother were very well traveled, the vibrant color of urban Trinidad really shaped their creative spirits. They were like something, I don't know, something about Trinidad kept them in Trinidad, you know what I mean? Even though they were well traveled. And that's really interesting because another artist, Peter Doig, who I'm also studying, he has a very similar experience when in terms of like Trinidad keeping them here. And that brings me to Sean O'Hagan, his study on Peter Doig. O'Hagan really states that Peter Doig is able to draw on themes of memory, dislocation, belonging, right? He has a very kind of elsewhere theme within his work, and that may be because he's very well traveled. He hasn't stayed in a place for too long, except Trinidad. He loved Trinidad. He stayed here for quite a while, right? And he even raised his shrine in Trinidad. So again, thinking to what I was saying before, what about Trinidad really keeps the artist here? And so yeah, so with Peter Doig's work, there's this sense of like dreaminess, a kind of mixing reality with dreams or with internalized memories. And he's able to like really blend them in such a way where it's not like the pieces themselves aren't anchored in a specific place, but it carries with them this kind of like elsewhere ideology, this thinking that like this kind of otherworldly thinking. It's almost like if all his past experiences kind of mix up to create this image. And why is this? Is it that he's trying to find stability? Why did he choose to create in this way? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Why, in order to further understand this concept of why behind the art, I really looked into John Dewey's artist experience, and I found some pretty interesting things, right? So for instance, Dewey really affirms the idea of art as a language that can be used to convey unique, powerful meanings, right? And we see this a lot in the aforementioned artist's work. He also really states that art is also for the viewer and highlights the importance of the exchange between viewer and artist and artwork. Because the viewer can be both somebody outside, and the viewer can also be the artist in the case of myself and Dwight. So states that sometimes once an artwork becomes, well, or obtains classical status, it somehow becomes isolated from the human conditions under which the artwork was created or brought into being, and from the human consequences that created it, you know, the actual life experience of the artist. And that's something that I want to look into. What are the consequences behind the art? He also speaks about experience and how it occurs constantly because of the interactions between live creatures and environments, and how this process is the very process of living, right? So under certain conditions of like resistance, conflict, right, a lot of these different experiences shape the way that we experience life, and in return shape our artworks. And I really want to dig into like how it does that, what is seen in the artwork. My goal for future research is to do the study again looking at female artists instead, and then I hope to take that further and compare the two, the male and the female art experience, and in terms of like how their lived experiences inform their visual artwork. I'd like to end off with a quote from John Dewey: "Art is an immediate realization of intent," and that's what I want to really explore. Thank you for listening.